The great war between humans and the Zellari Empire had finally ended, but peace did not feel peaceful. The stars were silent now, yet that silence carried the echo of screams, explosions, and broken dreams. The battlefield in space was filled with drifting wrecks of ships, some human, some alien, all lifeless. Amid that graveyard of steel floated one human vessel, the Seraphine, carrying Captain Daniel Ward, a man who had seen too much death to ever forget it. He had been chosen to represent humanity in the fragile peace talks with the alien race known as the Zellari, a species both feared and admired. They were taller than humans, their skin faintly metallic and glowing with natural patterns of light that shifted like the northern skies. To human eyes, they looked both beautiful and strange, something between art and nightmare. But none among them was more mysterious than Queen Lir-Aya, the ruler of the Zellari. She was known across galaxies as the Empress of Shadows. Many said she could crush ships with her mind or silence armies with a single command. But Daniel had read the reports, and between those cold military lines, he sensed something else, something like sorrow. When his ship landed on the royal planet of Zellara Prime, the air shimmered with silver mist. The palace rose from the ground like a mountain made of glass and moonlight. As Daniel walked through the halls, he noticed how every guard bowed with fear instead of pride. It felt like walking through a kingdom that had forgotten what warmth meant. At last, the grand doors opened and she appeared. The alien queen stepped into the light, her long form wrapped in flowing robes that shimmered with violet hues. Her face was hidden behind a dark veil, only her glowing eyes visible, two suns trapped behind silk. Her voice echoed softly through the hall, neither loud nor harsh, yet it carried power that could crush the strongest will. "Human," she said slowly, her accent delicate but heavy with emotion. "Why have you come before me?" Daniel bowed slightly, his hand over his heart. "To thank you, Your Majesty. The war took too many lives from both sides. I came to honor the one who ended it." Her tone turned bitter, like old metal. "Honor? You humans honor what you destroy. Why should I trust your words?" He looked up, meeting her golden eyes. "Because I've seen enough death to know peace is the only victory worth having." There was silence for a long moment. The queen tilted her head slightly, studying him. She seemed surprised that his voice carried no fear. Every other human she had met looked at her as if she were a monster, but this one, he looked at her as though she were simply a person. "You speak like a fool," she said finally. "Peace is built on lies. It will crumble again, as it always does." "Maybe," Daniel said gently, "but I'd rather build something fragile than destroy something beautiful." The queen turned away, her long veil flowing behind her. Her hands were thin, her skin glowing faintly with silver scars. She noticed his gaze and instantly covered her arms with her cloak. "Do not look at me," she said coldly. "I wasn't staring," Daniel replied softly. "I was wondering how much pain those marks carry." Her steps faltered. For a brief second, her proud shoulders lowered. No one had ever spoken to her that way. Not her generals, not her priests, not her people. They all called her divine, terrifying, or cursed, but never wounded. The air around them shimmered with tension. Daniel didn't move closer, but his eyes held something she hadn't seen in centuries: kindness. The queen whispered almost to herself, "You humans. You always see what is not meant to be seen." "Maybe that's why peace begins with us," Daniel answered quietly. Her golden eyes glowed brighter, reflecting his calm face. She did not reply. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the shattered sky above her world, where broken ships still burned in the atmosphere. The pain in her heart was old, but his words stirred something hidden deep within it, something she thought she had lost forever. For the first time in many years, the alien queen did not feel only hatred when looking at a human. She felt curiosity, and beneath that curiosity, something fragile began to form, something she could not name yet. As Daniel left the hall that night, he looked back once more. The queen stood there, still watching the stars, still wrapped in her veil, but somehow less alone than before. The days passed slowly on Zalara Prime. The palace was always quiet, too quiet. Even though peace had been declared, no one truly smiled. The alien halls were filled with echoing footsteps and empty eyes. The Zalari people obeyed their queen, but they didn't love her. They respected her power, but feared her presence. Captain Daniel Ward noticed it from the very first day. Wherever Queen Lyria walked, the air itself seemed to bend around her. Her guards bowed so deeply they never met her gaze. Servants moved like ghosts, careful not to make any sound. She ruled through strength, but strength had built walls around her heart. Daniel was allowed to stay within the palace during the peace discussions. Every morning he saw her sitting on her high throne, her veil covering her face completely. Only her golden eyes shone through, bright and distant like twin suns behind fog. She spoke little, only about trade, treaties, or rebuilding. Her words were sharp, never soft. Yet, even when she tried to hide her emotions, Daniel could see the cracks in her armor. When she looked at reports of fallen soldiers, her hands trembled slightly. When she signed documents about destroyed colonies, her voice grew quieter. She acted like a queen, but her heart still bled like a mother who had lost her children. One night, unable to sleep, Daniel wandered through the crystal corridors of the palace. The walls glowed faintly with the light of living minerals, turning the air silver blue. As he walked, he heard a faint sound, a soft, broken whisper coming from the Hall of Mirrors. Curious, he followed it. When he entered, he froze. There, standing alone in front of a tall black mirror, was Queen Lyria. Her veil was gone. For the first time, Daniel saw her true face. Her silver skin glowed faintly under the moonlight, marked by long, shining scars that ran down her cheeks, across her neck, and over her hands. The marks pulsed like living light, beautiful and terrible at once. But what struck Daniel most was her expression, so full of pain, so fragile that his heart ached. The queen's reflection trembled in the mirror as she whispered, "Monster. I am a monster." Daniel didn't move. He didn't want to frighten her. But she turned and saw him. Her golden eyes widened in horror, and she quickly raised her hands to cover her face. "Do not look at me," she cried, stepping back. Her voice cracked, trembling with shame. Daniel's voice came out gentle, steady, and kind. "I didn't mean to intrude, Your Majesty." "Then leave," she said sharply. "You humans do not need to see what I have become." He shook his head. "You're wrong. I didn't see something broken. I saw someone strong enough to survive what would have destroyed anyone else." Her breathing slowed, but her hand still covered her face. "You lie," she whispered. "No human would look at me without disgust. Your weapons did this to me. Your war carved these scars into my body." Daniel stepped closer, slowly so she could stop him if she wanted. "Then let this human tell you something, Queen Lyria. Scars are not shame. They are proof that you lived through what others could not." Her eyes met his. There was no mockery there, no fear, only truth. For a moment, the proud queen felt small, fragile, and strangely human. No one had spoken to her like that since before the war. Her people called her divine, her enemies called her cursed, but this human called her strong. She turned away again, her voice trembling. "Humans see beauty in strange things." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why we keep surviving. We learn to see light even in the ruins." The queen said nothing, but when he left the hall, her reflection in the mirror lingered a little longer. She touched her scars with her fingers, feeling the warmth of her own skin. For the first time, she didn't feel complete hatred for her reflection. That night, as she sat alone on her balcony, she looked at the stars, at the quiet sky that humans and Zalari now shared, and she wondered, if one human could see beauty in her scars, maybe the universe wasn't as cruel as she had believed. She whispered to herself, "Strange creature, why do your words stay in my heart?" But the stars didn't answer. They only shimmered softly, reflecting the first spark of hope inside the heart of a lonely queen. The next morning, sunlight from the twin moons spilled across the crystal palace, turning every wall into shades of silver and gold. The air was calm, but inside Queen Lyria's heart a strange storm brewed. She could not stop thinking about what the human had said the night before. Scars are proof that you lived through what others could not. Those words echoed in her mind again and again. She had heard thousands of voices in her lifetime, voices of warriors, priests, scholars, and enemies, but never one that spoke with such quiet truth. His words had not been spoken like a weapon. They had been spoken like a hand reaching into darkness, offering light. When she entered the council chamber that day, Daniel was already there. He stood near the long table made of crystal, reading reports from the human fleet. His presence felt different from everyone else's. He didn't bow too low. He didn't avoid her gaze. He didn't tremble when she spoke. "Captain Ward," she said, her voice softer than usual. He looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Your Majesty." It was a simple smile, but to her it felt disarming, too warm, too human, too honest. She frowned slightly, trying to hide her confusion. "Why do you always smile when you see me?" He blinked, surprised. "Because it's polite," he said lightly, but then his voice turned gentle. "And because I mean it." Her golden eyes narrowed. "Do I amuse you, human? Is that why you smile?" He shook his head. "No. I smile because I see someone who carries strength and grace even after everything she's endured." Lyria turned away, her veil brushing against her shoulders. "You speak strange things," she said. "Strength and grace. You look at me and see what my own people cannot." Daniel placed the datapad down. "Maybe your people are afraid to look closely. Sometimes beauty hides behind the pain we try to ignore." She froze. His words touched something deep within her, a place she had buried long ago. Beauty. No one had called her that since before the war. No one had dared. Her heart whispered, "He's lying to make peace easier." Yet her soul argued, "But what if he isn't?" Later that day, they walked through the palace gardens. It was one of the few places untouched by war. Strange glowing plants floated in the air, and streams of liquid light flowed across the ground like silver rivers. The queen rarely came here, but Daniel had asked politely, and she had agreed. As they walked, he noticed how carefully she moved, as if afraid to disturb even the wind. "Your world is beautiful," he said softly. "It feels alive." Lyria looked at the floating blossoms. "It was once brighter. The war dimmed its light just as it dimmed mine." He turned toward her. "But you kept it alive. That matters more than what was lost." She looked at him, her golden eyes glowing faintly. "You humans speak of hope even when surrounded by ashes. Why?" Daniel smiled again, that same quiet, fearless smile. "Because we've learned that hope is the only thing that survives when everything else burns." Something inside her shifted. For centuries she had believed that fear ruled the stars. But this fragile creature, this human, spoke as if love and courage could rebuild what hate had destroyed. They stopped near the fountain of crystal water, its surface glowing softly under the evening light. Lyria turned to him and asked quietly, "Do you not fear me?" Daniel's answer came without hesitation. "No. Even though I could end your life with a thought." He smiled again, calm and steady. "Then I'd die knowing I stood before someone worth dying for." The queen's breath caught. She didn't understand him. Humans were strange, foolish, brave, unpredictable. And yet something in her chest ached at his words. She looked away, whispering, "You humans feel too much." Daniel chuckled softly. "Maybe. But maybe that's what your world needs. A little more feeling." When he left the garden, the queen remained standing by the fountain. She touched her reflection in the glowing water. Her scars shimmered, but for the first time she didn't see ugliness in them. She saw light, and far away in the reflection of that water she could almost see his smile again, gentle, human, and unafraid. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face and heard his voice saying she was beautiful. And though she whispered to herself that he was wrong, her heart refused to believe it. The days on Zalara Prime passed in quiet rhythm. The once tense air between Queen Lyria and Captain Daniel Ward had softened. Their conversations no longer felt like negotiations. They felt like understanding. Yet beneath the calm surface, both carried deep wounds that words alone could not heal. One morning, Daniel was invited to visit the Sanctum of Memory, a sacred place within the palace that only the queen and her chosen few could enter. It was a hall of silence, filled with crystal walls that showed living memories. As Daniel stepped in, he saw light move across the glass. Images formed, scenes of battles, burning ships, and dying soldiers. The air felt heavy with sorrow. Lyria stood in the center, her back to him. She wore no veil today. Her long silver hair flowed like threads of light, and her scars shimmered faintly in the reflection. Without turning, she said, "Do you know what this place is, human?" Daniel's voice was low. "A place of remembrance?" "It is more than that," she whispered. "These crystals hold the memories of every Zalari who fell in war. When we touch them, we feel their last moments, their pain, their hope, their fear." Daniel's chest tightened. "You carry all that alone?" She turned slowly, her golden eyes dim. "It is my duty. I was their queen when they died. I was the one who sent them into battle. Every scar on my body came from the same weapons that killed my people." "Your weapons?" The last words came out like a wound reopening. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, Daniel saw not the powerful Empress of Shadows, but a soul drowning in guilt. He stepped forward carefully. "I wish I could erase what my people did," he said softly. "But if I could, the world would forget the lessons those scars taught us." Her gaze sharpened. "Lessons? You call this pain a lesson?" "Yes," Daniel said, "because it reminds us what hate creates and what love can still rebuild." For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the hum of the crystal walls filled the silence. Lyria walked closer to one of the glowing panels and placed her hand upon it. The light pulsed under her touch. A soft sound filled the room like a heartbeat. She whispered, "Before the war, I was known for my beauty. My people saw me as perfection. But when your weapon struck my ship, the radiation burned my skin. These marks appeared, and they never faded. My people began to call me cursed. Even after I saved them, they looked at me with pity." Her voice trembled. "They loved my face more than my soul." Daniel's throat tightened. "Then they were blind." Lyria looked at him, her eyes uncertain. "Blind?" "Yes," he said. "They saw the surface and not the strength that kept them alive. You call these scars ugly, but I see them as proof that you endured the impossible." The queen's lips parted slightly, but she could not find words. The warmth in his voice reached a place she had buried beneath layers of duty and silence. No one, not even her closest advisors, had ever spoken to her that way. Daniel stepped closer. "You didn't lose your beauty, Lyria. You changed it. The fire didn't destroy you, it carved your courage into your skin." For a moment her eyes glistened. She turned away quickly, hiding her face. "You speak as if you understand suffering." He exhaled slowly. "Maybe I do. I lost my brother in the same war. I blamed your people for years. I carried hate until it nearly destroyed me. But meeting you made me realize something. We're all victims of the same pain." The queen's breath caught. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore, it was human, fragile, real. She whispered, "You are strange, human. You do not fear me and you do not worship me. You only see me." Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe that's all anyone wants, to be seen for who they really are. She looked at him then, truly looked. The kindness in his eyes frightened her more than any weapon ever had. Because in that moment she realized something dangerous. He was healing her without even trying. When Daniel finally left the sanctum, the queen stood alone among the glowing memories. She placed a hand on her chest where her heart pulsed softly beneath her scars. And for the first time in years, Lyria did not feel cursed, she felt alive. The moons were high that night, their light spilling across the balcony of the Zalari palace like a river of silver. The war was over, but the scars it left behind still lived in every corner of the queen's heart. Yet something had changed inside her. Since the human Daniel Ward had entered her world, she felt emotions she thought were long dead. Curiosity, warmth, and a strange ache she couldn't name. Queen Lyria stood near the balcony, the cold wind brushing against her skin. She looked at her reflection in the crystal glass of her chamber doors. The silver scars on her face glowed faintly. She used to hate that light. She used to hide it behind her veil. But tonight she did not wear the veil. The door opened quietly behind her. She didn't turn, she already knew who it was. "Couldn't sleep again?" Daniel's calm voice broke the silence. She smiled faintly, her back still turned. "You humans are too good at noticing things." He stepped closer, his footsteps soft on the polished floor. "You're easy to notice," he said simply. Her smile faded. "Is that meant to be a compliment?" He shrugged gently. "Only if you want it to be." Lyria turned to face him. Her golden eyes shimmered under the moonlight, and for the first time Daniel saw her without any walls. No crown, no veil, no armor, just her. She crossed her arms, trying to sound firm even as her voice softened. "Tell me something, human. Why do you keep calling me beautiful? You've seen what I look like. You've seen what I've done. And still you speak as if I am worthy." Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked at her as if searching for the right words, not because he didn't know them, but because he wanted to say them right. "Because I don't see what you see when you look at yourself," he said finally. "You see scars. I see stories. You see pain. I see proof that you never gave up." Her lips parted slightly. His voice was calm but heavy with truth. "You call yourself hideous," he continued softly. "But when I look at you, I see light that refused to die in darkness. How can that be anything but beautiful?" The queen's heart trembled. For a long time she didn't speak. Her gaze dropped to the floor and she whispered, "Do you really believe that, or are you just kind?" He took one step closer. "Kindness doesn't make lies sound real," he said gently. "Truth does." Her chest rose and fell slowly, and for a brief moment her eyes filled with something she had not felt in centuries. Hope. She whispered, almost like a secret to herself. "Strange human. You make me feel like I belong to this universe again." Daniel smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You always did. You just stopped believing it." The wind blew between them, carrying the scent of alien flowers that glowed faintly in the night. Lyria looked at him and said quietly, "You humans, you have strange hearts. So fragile, yet so brave." Daniel chuckled softly. "We break easily, but that's why we learn how to heal others." She stared at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. "And what if you cannot heal me?" He met her gaze with quiet strength. "Then I'll stay beside you until you learn to heal yourself." Those words struck deeper than any blade. Lyria felt her throat tighten. For centuries she had carried loneliness like a crown. She had faced war, betrayal, and silence, but never kindness like this. Never someone who saw her for who she was. Her voice shook as she asked, "Why me, Daniel? Why care for someone like me?" He smiled again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because sometimes the universe hides its brightest stars behind the darkest skies." For a moment neither moved. The two of them stood under the twin moons, staring at each other. An alien queen scarred by war and a human soldier scarred by love. Their worlds had collided in battle, but now they met in peace. Lyria looked down, her hands trembling slightly. She whispered, "You speak like no man I've ever met. And you listen like no queen I've ever known," he said softly. Her eyes lifted to meet his again. The distance between them felt smaller now, not measured in space but in trust. When Daniel finally turned to leave, Lyria called out quietly, "Daniel." He paused at the door. She hesitated, then said softly, "Thank you for seeing me." He smiled over his shoulder. "Always." As the door closed behind him, the queen stood under the moonlight, her heart no longer heavy with shame. For the first time in a long, long time, she touched her scars and did not feel pain. She felt warmth, and though she didn't say it aloud, deep inside, she knew his words had already begun to heal her. Days passed after that moonlit conversation, but Queen Lyria couldn't forget Daniel's words. "You always did belong. You just stopped believing it." Those words echoed inside her like music, soft, healing, and painful all at once. Every morning she found herself searching for him. Sometimes she would see him training with her guards, his movements sharp and precise. Other times he would be sitting under the glowing trees of the royal garden, his eyes distant as if remembering another world far from hers. She didn't understand this human. He had no power, no royal blood, no reason to care for her, and yet he stood by her like no one else ever had. One afternoon, while the twin suns burned low in the alien sky, Lyria called for him. He arrived quietly, bowing slightly as was their custom. "You called, Your Majesty?" Her lips twitched at the title. "Must you always call me that, Daniel?" He smiled faintly. "You are a queen, aren't you?" "Not to you," she replied softly. The air fell silent. Daniel looked at her, truly looked at her, and for a moment even the wind forgot to move. There was something fragile in her eyes, something only he could see. "I wanted to show you something," she said finally. "Come with me." He followed her through the corridors of crystal and light until they reached a hidden chamber. Inside, a massive window opened to a view of the sky. Endless stars swirling in violet and blue. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal with a holographic image of her planet before the war. "This was Zalara," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Before the fire, before the death." Daniel stepped closer, the gentle glow of the projection lighting his face. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Lyraya's fingers brushed across the image and it shifted, showing ruins, ashes, and broken cities. "This is what I caused," she said. "When I went to war to protect my throne, I didn't realize I was destroying what I wanted to save." Her voice cracked slightly. "They call me the Moon Queen, but I feel more like a shadow than light." Daniel didn't interrupt. He just stood beside her, silent and steady, letting her words pour out. "I thought I needed to be strong," she continued, her golden eyes dim. "But I forgot that strength without mercy is just another form of weakness." Daniel turned to her and spoke gently. "You were trying to protect your people. That's not weakness." She shook her head, tears glimmering in the light. "Tell that to the children who lost their homes. To the stars that fell because of me." He took a step forward. "You can't rewrite the past, Lyraya," he said softly. "But you can choose what kind of story you live next." She blinked, her tears catching the light like fragments of stars. "And what kind of story do you think I deserve?" Daniel smiled, a soft, sad smile. "One where you forgive yourself." Her heart trembled. No one had ever said those words to her. For years, her advisors, her soldiers, even her people had spoken of duty, victory, and pride. But forgiveness? That was a language she had forgotten. She turned away, her voice barely a whisper. "You speak like a man who's seen pain." "I have," he said quietly. "Earth had its own wars. I've made choices I regret too. But I learned that guilt doesn't keep us good, it just keeps us broken." She looked at him again, really seeing him. His eyes held that same mix of grief and hope she felt in herself. For a brief moment, she felt less alone in the universe. Slowly, she reached out her hand toward him. "You confuse me, Daniel Ward." He tilted his head. "How so?" "You make me feel things I buried long ago. Things that shouldn't belong to a queen." He smiled softly. "Then feel them as a person, not a queen." The air between them grew quiet, filled only by the soft hum of the projection. Lyraya lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "And what if those feelings hurt?" "Then they're real," he whispered. Her heart skipped a beat. For centuries, she had lived surrounded by walls of duty and fear. But now, standing beside a single human, those walls began to crack. When Daniel turned to leave, she called out his name. "Daniel!" He stopped and looked back. "Do you ever miss your world?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Every day. But lately I've found something here that feels like home." Her breath caught in her chest. "Home?" He nodded. "Maybe not a place. Maybe a person." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her voice was lost somewhere between disbelief and longing. As he left the room, the queen stood still, staring at the stars. For the first time in her life, she realized that even in the vast, cold universe, someone had chosen to stay. The stars outside the palace burned brighter that night. It was the anniversary of the Great War, the day both the humans and Zalari remembered their losses. Across the planet, thousands gathered to honor the fallen. Queen Lyraya stood at the balcony of her palace, looking over the glowing city below. The people chanted her name with respect, but inside her heart there was only silence. She wore her ceremonial armor, polished silver streaked with lines of light. The scars on her face glowed faintly beneath the twin moons, and for the first time she didn't hide them. Daniel stood behind her, silent, watching the woman who had once been feared by galaxies. He could see the strength in her posture, but also the pain she still carried. "You should be with your people," he said softly. "I am," she replied, her voice distant. "But tonight, I feel like a stranger among them." Daniel walked closer until he stood beside her. "You've rebuilt their world. That's more than any ruler could do." Lyraya turned to him slowly. Her golden eyes reflected the stars, but there was something fragile in them. "You still don't understand, human. They love their queen, not the woman beneath the crown." Daniel smiled faintly. "Then show them both." She frowned slightly. "Both?" he nodded. Show them that their queen bleeds, hopes, and feels. That she's real. For a long moment, she stared at him and then she whispered, real. I haven't felt that word in centuries. The wind blew softly through her hair, carrying a scent of flowers that only bloomed once a year. The people below released silver lanterns into the night sky, each one a prayer for peace. Lyria watched them float upward, her chest tightening. I wish I could be like them, she said. Simple, free. Daniel's voice was gentle. You can. Just take off the armor. She looked at him in surprise. Now? He nodded. Now. For the first time, the queen removed her ceremonial armor in public. The heavy chest plate fell to the floor with a dull echo. Her long robe fluttered in the wind, revealing the scars that trailed down her neck and arms. Gasps rose from below as the people saw what she had hidden for years. Her guards looked uncertain, but Daniel stood beside her, tall, calm, unshaken. Lyria raised her head high, her voice echoing through the royal plaza. My people, she began, her tone steady but full of emotion. For too long, I have ruled from behind masks and walls. I thought my scars made me unworthy of your love. I thought beauty was perfection. The crowd was silent, listening. But today, she continued, I have learned that beauty is not the absence of pain. It is the courage to live through it. Daniel's heart swelled with pride as she spoke. Lyria's voice grew stronger. This human taught me that strength is not in armor, but in kindness. That hope is not in victory, but in forgiveness. She turned her head slightly toward Daniel. He stood still, his eyes meeting hers.